Welcome back to Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. This one is entitled School Library Volunteering. This actually started when I was in middle school, but I'm not really going to concentrate much on that because I think the librarian just kind of liked me a little. It gave me a shoe in a little bit, but the librarian in the high school library was different. Anyways, basically, the school year started ninth grade. I was a freshman in high school, and English class or something. They took us to the library, so I got to know the librarian, just who she was and that. Her name was Mrs. Zeltzer, not Seltzer, but Zeltzer. Maybe we got along because we were both Jewish. I don't know, but that was a nice thing. She had red hair, kind of an interesting. She had a little something with her, the way she articulated words. Just every now and again, she had a little something about that. Kind of how, if you remember Shirley Booth from the show Hazel back in the day, she sort of had this thing. She had kind of an odd voice. Well, she had something a little like that with her voice. Well, anyways, we got along, and I think what I did was I sort of stopped in after school, and I said, "Hi, I don't know if you remember me. I was here earlier in the day for English class. I was wondering if you need anybody to help out in the library." I just posed this. Well, I don't really like anybody messing with the books. Har, har, har. I don't really know, what do you mean? This and that? I said, well, I'm a computer guy. I've been working with computers since I was a kid. And when I was in the middle school, I don't know if you knew, Miss Rosen was her name, I believe, yeah. And she was also Jewish. Go figure. Anyway, I don't know if you talked to her much or whatever, but my friend and I used to volunteer there, and we had a computer there. So I used to work on that and do things for her on there, and my friend would like shelve books and stuff like that. I said, I didn't really do the book part, but I'm certainly willing to learn if that's what you need. But, I'm kind of really here in case computers. Well, I mean, I get all kinds of kids come in here. She's been around for a long time at this school, so she knows the deal. But I was an honest kid, and I was not looking for anything but just somewhere to go. I said, really, one of the reasons I'm here is because I don't want to sit in the lunchroom with all the other fucking lunatics. I'm sort of an outcast. I always was in school. Last picked in gym class, and they didn't even want to pick you even last, kind of thing. And I was always the nerdy kid, I was always the oddball. But that's who I was, so that's just too bad. So I said, rather than have to deal with their antics and bullshit, I'd rather come here. Can I just come here? I'll sit quietly, I'll read, or, if you have a computer issue or anything like that. Well, let's try it out. I said, okay. I got a pass or something. I don't remember how it exactly worked. That I was allowed to go to the library. And I got another pass later on that gave me, quote unquote, keys to the city and carte blanche. It's a long story, sort of. Every time it was time for lunch, I would go to the library. Hey, what's doing? Oh, not much today, whatever. Now, we didn't have computers much. The books were checked out manually. We had a card catalog. We had the old school library. There's nothing computerized. In the back room, they had a bunch of Apple IIe's with green monochrome screens. And that ran a word processor called Bank Street Writer. And it sucked. It was horrible. It was a well-known software program back in the day, and a lot of people used it, but I knew better. I said, what about that IBM PC back there? Oh, well, that is the GIS machine. What the hell is GIS? She explained it, something to do with colleges, or I don't know exactly, but it kind of sat there off all the time. And it was a true blue IBM PC, not an XT, but a true blue IBM PC, because when you would turn it on, and that had an amber monochrome screen, when you would turn it on, it had nothing but a flashing cursor in the upper left corner of the screen. The original IBM PC did not display a memory count. The XT did that and beyond, but the PC didn't. And she had told me a story about that machine where she took it home for the weekend, and her brother had put extra memory in the machine, and it was oddly configured at 608 kilobytes rather than 640 kilobytes. I never was able to poke around in the machine and see if maybe a dip switch was set wrong or anything like that, but it was 608, and that was close enough to 640, and that was it. Had a hard drive also. The good old venerable ST225, 20 megabyte hard drive, 5 1/4 inch. You turn the machine on, and it would just, and it would get up to speed, and it was stepper motor driven for the heads, so it would get up to speed, so it was, and then the drive would reset, and the stepper motor, because stepper motors make sounds when you drive them at different rates, it would go beep, where it would move the heads to the end of the disc and back again. Sometimes, depending on when the machine was turned off, because when people turned this thing off, they didn't park the heads or anything like that. And that is a debate for people. A lot of people say always park the heads. Other people say it's not really necessary because the head ends up in a different place each time if you run different programs. And others say, well, it should go to the park position and end up in the landing zone so it doesn't harm any data, this, that, and the third. So it's all a matter of debate, but nobody would ever park the heads. So occasionally when you turn the machine on, that hard drive would make other cool sounds, where instead of doing that beep, it would first go beep. So it kind of would have to step itself back until it knew it was at the 0 track, and then it would seek full stroke like that. So anyways, very intrigued with that machine because I never owned a PC. I had a PC Junior that didn't have a hard drive, and that was soon rectified in my life. That's another old war story to tell one day, unless I already did. I can't remember. I'll have to check the list. Anyways, monochrome screen, no graphics. It was not Hercules graphics or anything. There's just text. And I sat there, and there was no interwebs or anything like that, but I brought in discs. And I loaded a program called Professional Write. That was the word processor I used, and it worked in text mode. And when we were sent to the library from English class to type a report, I would get that machine. Nobody else was allowed to use it. Oh, and it had a Panasonic 9-pin dot matrix printer. Kind of fun. I used to play with that a lot, and the PC in general, and I had a program I was working on, so I tested it with that Panasonic. It was meant for the IBM Pro printer, which I had at home, that I wrote that program in BASIC. Still have it to this day. That was quite the masterpiece for me at 13 years old, writing that. Not really knowing what I was doing, but still made a functional program that was quite involved at that. Did a lot of different stuff. And I don't think I have the source code for that anymore. But it's compiled into an executable, so it doesn't need that. And I'm certainly, it would be nice if I did still have the source code that I could go back in there and fix a zillion mistakes that I made and jazz things up a bit. But at the time, I did have the source code. It's somewhere I don't know if it's on a disk somewhere I'll never find that's unreadable nowadays or what. But anyway, I used to play with that a lot. But I got chummy with the librarian. There was also another machine that was a 286. Ooh, fancy powerhouse. And that had a color screen. Well, she only used this machine infrequently. She had a database of all of the books, and she would take all of her cards to see all the stuff that's checked out and mark it down in this database. And then when it got to be the end of the school year, she would run something that would print out on some sort of Epson printer. I can't remember if I have one of those. I might. Whatever it was, but it was kind of junky, that one, but it worked. And that would print out a paper saying your name and the book that's missing or books that are missing. And it has to be returned to the library before the end of the year. Otherwise, you won't get your report card, or if you were a senior, you won't get your diploma. I did not really have access to that machine until it was deemed necessary. And here's the necessary part. There was yet another machine in the library that was also a just wonderful piece of old technology. It was some sort of PC clone, also with an amber monochrome screen, and it had an HP ThinkJet printer. This was one of the most early inkjet printers. Special cartridge it took, as all inkjet printers would, and it printed text only because that's all the machine really could produce. That was the InfoTrack machine. I don't know if these things are still around. They're certainly not in this form. But like I said, this was a PC clone, or maybe even an XT clone, either which way. It had a proprietary ISA card that plugged into the bus with its own connector to drive a special CD-ROM drive. Almost unheard of on machines of this age. But they did it because that was the only way that they could fit the amount of data that needed to be available. We didn't have hard drives of this size. Like I said, the other machine had a 20 megabyte hard drive, where a CD could hold 650 megabytes of data. Well, this CD drive was so old, it took something called a caddy. Let me know if any of you remember CD drives that took a caddy. That was a holder thing that you would put the CD in and close up, and that whole cartridge thing went into the drive. That was old school shit. Well, anyway, I forget what else. There was something else we were going to do with that machine. It did not have a hard drive at all. But the long and short of it is, eventually the CD-ROM drive died. And we could not get, at the time, a compatible replacement. So that machine was sort of relegated to, I don't work anymore. And they moved it off of the counter where it was, and they put it in the back next to that old IBM PC. And it just sat there collecting dust unused. The ThinkJet printer went on to the other machine. And the reason, by the way, and what the InfoTrack machine was a thing for looking up magazine articles, or what articles might be in a magazine. Occasionally, it would give an abstract of the article as well, and it would let you print that stuff. And if you wanted to take out the magazine, you had to print it out, and it would print on this HP ThinkJet, which took the paper with the holes on the sides. So it was really old school. Took the paper with the holes on the sides, and then you would bring it to the back office where the lady would go, different lady, who I also got very chummy with, and she would go in the back and see if she could get that magazine for you. So you could use it for your school report, or if you just wanted to read it, you could do that too. This is what we did back. People didn't have phones, so this is what we did back in those days. So there was that, and I was able to get the InfoTrack software loaded onto that 286 machine that she would use for her database. But the problem was there had to be a way to get into that, and there wasn't, because of the way the machine was set up. Like, this machine had to be locked down so kids couldn't do that. I had a small DOS program that you needed a password to get back to a prompt. And in the old days of prior to DOS 6.0, you didn't have the F5, F8 keys that you could press to bypass all the stuff and get right to a prompt. And so there was really no way into this machine like that. But if you knew Control Break at the right time, you could break out of the auto execute bat file and do stuff, and there's a way to turn that off. So I had something that would do that. And then you had to type in a password. And I asked her, I said, what should the password be? And she said, make it Sesame. I said, Sesame? She says, yeah, like Open Sesame. I said, okay, and that's what the password was. So I turned this machine into a dual purpose where it could run the InfoTrack software, and in downtime she could run her database to find out what books were missing and stuff like that. So that was a nice one. And there was one time, in fact, that she actually came to some class that I was in. I don't know if it's a science class or an English class or a math class. I don't remember. But she knocked on the door and came in. They all know the librarian. She says, I need Jason. Okay. So I'm saying, what did I do? So we're walking back, and she tells me in the hallway, I remember you said that you like a challenge. I said, I do, occasionally. So that was the challenge, was to make this machine work like that. And she pulled me out of class to do that. That was a special thing, because A, I didn't know that she could do that, and I said, B, how did she know what class I was in? She said, I went to the main office, I looked up your schedule, and I could pull you out of class. And that's what she did. And I got it working again, or whatever it was. That was over a couple days where I kind of fine-tuned all of that, but that was what we did. And that machine also had a lock over the disk drives, some special thing that was a metal thing that went over the drive, so you couldn't stick a floppy disk in. We didn't have USB ports in these days, and it was locked down with Allen, hex screws. So you needed an Allen wrench to get it open. And occasionally she had to open that to get access to it and that. And anyway, that was that little bit. But like I said, I was sort of eventually given keys to the city and carte blanche. So the way that all worked... Oh, we also had a copier in the back, which kind of ties into this. We had a copier in the back. I don't know how you pronounce it. Lanier. Lanier? Not sure, but this thing was old, had a zillion copies on it. It was in bad shape, but for the library it worked. It might have been like the main office copier for a while until it just got too crotchety and they said, here, you can have it. But, and the kids could make copies, but the problem was you couldn't just go up there and copy stuff because they knew that kids would go and just copy everything and sit on the glass and copy their butt and this, that, and the third. So there was a coin operated thing where you had to put a dime in to make a copy. And somehow that communicated with the machine and the green light would light and then you could copy. Well, occasionally copies would fuck up. Either the kid accidentally copied the wrong page, and it's only a dime, we know, and some kids were like, oh fuck, I fucked up, and they drop another dime in, they don't care. But other times they would go to the librarian, listen, I fucked up, I copied the wrong page. Oh, no problem, here's a dime. She had a thing of dimes in the drawer there, you know, just whatever. It was just collected back anyway. It wasn't real money, it was just kind of there, you know. So there was that, and other times the copier would just plain old jam or give you just a black page or a white page or something, or it was running out of toner and you couldn't read it or something like that. Well, there was an override for it that was a key, one of those round keys that you put in. It's a cylindrical key, and then you turn it and that would override the coin box. So I had access to that. So when a kid would come up and they say, I was just using the copier, I said, I got it. And I go in the drawer, I get the key out, and I'd go and I'd give them a copy. And they're like, can I get another one? I'm like, sure, it's free now. Just, I mean, don't tell no one. You know, I'll give you, 3, 4, 5 maybe. Whatever you need. Just make it quick so I don't get in trouble. So I used to give them couple of free copies if they needed it. Other kids were just, no, I got what I needed, thank you, and that's that, So there was that. And then later on, so I was now in senior year, and I became involved with the girlfriend now with. She was in my math class. Well, it so turns out that out of all of the years that math teacher was almost never, ever out sick. He got real fucking sick. And he had laryngitis. And he was out for like 2, even 3 weeks. So we had a sub. And you know how it is when you have a substitute teacher. We all remember those days. So anyway, I would say I'm going to the library. And I had a pass that the librarian gave me that essentially gave me quote-unquote keys to the city. Keys to the city means this pass was carte blanche saying I can go to the library during any period at any time for any reason, and there it was. So if any of the hall monitor dicks would stop me, I got a pass. All right. Anything like that. But they knew who I was and what I was doing. Some did. But anyway, I was just walk down there, go in the library, and I'd go on the computer and do stuff. And we had another computer, which we'll get to in a minute. But I'll finish up with this. So we're in math class, and the girlfriend is there. And I said, do you want to go to the library with me? Obviously, we couldn't do anything there because it was the library, but I said this way, we don't have to be in the class. Well, I don't have a pass. I said, I got you. Now this was kind of an admit one kind of thing, so I kind of overstepped my bounds, but I went in and I said, hi, do you know Patty? Oh, yeah. Why, does she have a pass? Or I said, she's, if it's all right, she's on my pass. Well, I mean, all right, just sit quietly. And we did, and we talked amongst ourselves quietly and whatever. I might have helped her with homework for another class because she was taking chemistry that year. I had already taken it, so I was helping her with that. And we were just playing the boyfriend-girlfriend game, stuff like that. So she would go to the library with me on occasion when we had a sub and we were in the same class together. So that was kind of nice that I was able to overstep my bounds and yet extend the courtesy a little further. But somewhere along the line, maybe 11th grade, we got another computer, a Gateway 2000. Well, that's gone these days. It was a Gateway 2000. Super VGA graphics, Cirrus Logic, graphics card, 256 colors, and I don't know, 4 megabytes of RAM. This was high-end shit for the day. It had maybe an 80 megabyte hard drive and Windows 3.1 or 3.11 for workgroups, in fact. And that had internet access. Not really internet access. Now, I talked about this in another old war story called VAX. So, VAX. So you could watch that. There's going to be a link in the description. So I'm not getting into that really. But long and short of the story was that was my first start on the interwebs on that machine. And we had a 24-pin Epson dot matrix printer on that. And that had some nice print quality. And I could do all kinds of stuff. I downloaded games for DOS and did all kinds of great stuff back in those days toward the end, and it was just a really happy time. And after that, every year, sometime in January, I would go back to the high school. I would call first and ask to be connected to the library, and they'd patch me through. They had that, I don't know how, but they'd patch me through, and I said, "Hi, remember me? Yeah, I want to come visit." "Oh, okay, yeah, Wednesday will be fine." "Okay, I'll see you around noon." And sure enough, like the next 4 or 5 years, I would go back to the library. And I would have to go there, and there was a security guard, but he was kind of like, "What are you here for?" I said, "I'm a visitor. I'm going to the school library to see Mrs. Zeltzer." And they had to take me to the main office and write me a hall pass. And then I would go in there. "Hi, how you doing? Oh my God, it's been so long. Oh God, you grew more. This and that, all that kind of shit like that." And we just talk shit, shoot the shit for hours. And sometimes we'd even go to lunch. Indeed, we would go to lunch, go out for lunch, and she'd buy me lunch and stuff like that. It was a good time all around. It was a very, very rewarding experience. And it beat the absolute shit out of sitting in the lunchroom with all of those fucking lunkheads. Because the kids in my grade, they were just, and me being who I was, just didn't play nice. So it was a nice retreat. And all in all, a very rewarding experience in that regard, and something that I will always remember. The lady who was in the back that would get the magazines I mentioned before, she, as well as the librarian, were invited to my wedding and attended, along with my 11th grade English teacher. Yeah, 11th grade English teacher, because she loved me to bits as well. And she came, all of them with their husbands and that. And yeah, all 3 of them actually accepted and came to my wedding. And I have pictures to prove it and all of that. She's another story that I could tell another time. I'll have to write that one down. But that's going to wrap up this episode of Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. I certainly thank you for watching, and I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe, and take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.